There's a reason why those magic number in sales sometimes are around that 60 to 65% mark. Because if you're selling at 100%, you're selling too cheap. And anybody on the block can be the cheap guy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Home Service Hustle. I'm your host, Jonathan Bannister, and today's guest is going to talk to you about him growing up on the streets of Stockton, California, how he made it up to the backwoods of Idaho, how he traveled the country, his MMA career, and how he started a granite business when he did not know a single thing about the granite business. This guy is a motivational speaker. He is the host of multiple podcasts. Please, everyone, welcome Chad Dammarell. Let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Home Service Hustle. And today I'd like to welcome you to our next guest, Chad Dammarell. I had the pleasure of meeting Chad a couple weeks ago out at an event in California. Jason Walker put on. Chad, you blew my mind with some of the stories you told. Obviously, our backgrounds kind of cross some with your MMA. But you gave a speech, and your perspective on mindset and your energy is just like second to none. So I had to have you on the show. You do a couple podcasts yourself, so I knew that you would be able to deliver some amazing content to our guests. So welcome. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to meet you as well. That was an amazing event thrown by Jason. And with that, being said, going down there and, having the opportunity, that was my first on stage, like speaking, event.
Oh, wow.
To do that for motivational speaking, so to speak. And I've promoted fights in the past and I've been in front of a lot of crowds, but to prepare and do that was, it was an experience in and of itself. So it was pretty fun to reflect. And
you couldn't have asked one person in that audience if they would have ever thought, like, was this Chad's first time doing this? Like, no one would have said yes to that. So you did absolutely phenomenal. So let's kind of talk about where all that stuff came from on stage. Where you grew up in California, in Stockton, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, what was that life like? Look, I'm originally from Biloxi, Mississippi. I live in Dallas, Texas now. So when I, hear someone that's from Stockton, California, I'm not thinking I'm meeting Chad, right? So
yeah.
What was life like growing up in Stockton?
It was fun, man. Like I was lucky enough to have my parents always like kept me in check with a good perspective. But there was a lot of things that would have been that for the longest time I thought was normal growing up in that area. And the more that I was able to travel and the more that I was able to venture out, the more I began to realize that like life is different in all these different places. And some of the things that I thought were normal aren't normal. What was lucky for me is the fact that I was able to go on vacations with my parents. My parents were my best friends, and their best friends were all 20 to 30 years their elder. So when I was hanging out on all these weekends, like, yeah, I had some time with my friends and stuff like that, but I was surrounded by this wisdom and this perspective and this knowledge. And I always had a respect for storytelling and listening to the elders just indulge and talk about their past and look at me as being young and reflect. So every time I went somewhere, I kind of carried their stories with me. And fortunately, I started hunting in Idaho with my dad at 10 years old. So when we would do that, I'd have a month of the summer up there. We'd set up hunting camp and then turn around September. He'd pull me out of school for 5 weeks and I'd spend 5 weeks archery hunting for elk in the mountains of Idaho in a town of, 100 people. And we weren't even in town. We were 8 miles out of town. So every time I'd return to Stockton, I had that other perspective of like this slower way of life and the simpler way of life. And then I reinvest back into the grind of Stockton. So it always made me different, but like I always respected every side of the tracks. And that's one of the things that I'm most thankful for about growing up somewhere like Stockton is a lot of people only know one thing. Even some people in Stockton, they just know that. And they think that everywhere outside of there is exactly like that. And it's like, it's not. It's not like that at all, man. There's all these different places, all these different ways of life. Up here, people think that they have one car broken into and it makes front page newspaper. They catch the freaking guy and they're like, this town is going to shit. I'm like, man, you guys never want to go to Stockton. I'm telling you that right now. Like, this is your bad is some of the best I've ever experienced. So that translates to perspective. And growing up, man, yeah, I was in a lot of fights and stuff and all kinds of shit like that. But I know friends from every single angle, and it makes me never judge a book by its cover. And I've seen tons of people come from nothing to something. I've seen people that were at the top of the world go to nothing. So my entire life, it's just something that I've paid attention to. And being raised in Stockton, I think made me very aware of that side of life and gave me a good perspective is what I'll say.
Well, I wasn't going to lead in from this angle to get to this topic of MMA, but you did mention, you got in a lot of fights while you're in Stockton. So did that kind of help lay that path for you to your MMA career?
Yeah, really. I mean, like it kind of started, I started off in Taekwondo as a kid, just being involved in martial arts. So you get a general feeling of respect there, but I quit for sports. So that was always something that like, man, I was just about to get my black belt in Taekwondo, but football was coming up. My dad's like, well, you can't do both. So I just quit and played football. I look at that as a regret, but then going on, it's fine. In high school, my buddy, he started his senior project on boxing. And my dad always had a punching bag in the garage. So from karate, I knew how to throw straight punches. My dad was teaching me how to box all, randomly. And then when my buddy started doing his senior project on boxing, he would come over and we would spar, and then we'd spar the neighbors. And my dad always had a thing that if anybody in the neighborhood or the block was like talking shit, sorry, I don't know if I can cuss, sorry, talking loud. And basically, he would have me spar him all the time. And they'd come over, and that was a thing. And that's when I first started realizing more and more like, oh shoot, I can fight. But in school, it was always a fear thing, man. Somebody trying to punk me, someone trying to pick on me, so I'd fight. And then the way it translated to MMA was my older brother's 7 years older than me, and he used to fight all the time. And I was petrified of him, man, like petrified. So I was 17 or 18. And that's when my brother started training at this kickboxing gym. And then we were all drinking with my dad, and my dad started pumping us full of shots of tequila. And then he's like, hey, you guys are going to go in the backyard now and handle this. And we're like, what? And I'm like, my brother's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you guys are going to put on the boxing gloves and go box in the backyard. My brother's like 26, dude. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to demolish me. Like I was so scared. And we went back there, and my dad made us do 3 1-minute rounds. And yeah, let's just say I did all right. So that it changed that moment. Like I'm thankful for my dad doing that, because there's a lot of times in life where you might not know what you're good at, or you have a lot of fear, but that brought it out of me. Like I'm like, dude, I went toe to toe with my brother like nothing, and like this is cool. And then shortly there later, within a year or so, that's when I met Bobby and Dave in a hotel room. And I'd been looking for a place to train a guy in an apprenticeship class. Jeremiah Metcalf is really responsible for getting me into MMA. He was in my apprenticeship class and was talking about MMA. And I'm like, dude, how much you get paid? He's like, oh, it all depends. But I mean, it's pretty easy to make $200 win or lose. I'm like, I can make $200 even if I get my ass whipped. He's like, yeah. I was like, dude, I'm fucking down.
Sign me up.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, can I cuss on here? I got.
Yeah, man, we fucking cuss. Say whatever you want.
Okay, all right. Because I was like, that's twice. And I was like, but yeah. So I went back looking for the gym. My brother didn't want me to train at the same gym as him, and I run into Bobby and Dave. They tell me Bobby's got a fight coming up, and like we're at a hotel party randomly, and I meet these guys. They're like, yeah, come into the gym. So Monday, that was Saturday night. Monday, I show up, and at this time I had hair past my shoulders and stuff. I go in there, they're not in there. I train all night, I get demolished. And I'm in sweatpants and a t-shirt. I didn't know about a gi or nothing. My pants are getting ripped down, and it was wild and fun. So literally Tuesday, man, I went to work, I come home, went straight to Supercuts and freaking just took all my hair, just buzzed it straight down. I showed up Wednesday and we rolled, all night. And for the listeners, that's jujitsu, that's just training. So we roll for like 2 hours with Bobby, Dave, and a few of the other guys. And they're like, "Hey, what's up, man? I'm Bobby. I'm like, it's Chad from Saturday." They're like, "What?" Because I cut my hair off. They didn't recognize me. And that was the start of it, man. And it was so much fun. It's so much fun.
So yeah, I mean, so your dad pretty much may have started like the first backyard brawl. It just wasn't recorded and thrown on YouTube or something,
Hey,
right?
that's a fact, man. Like he was always doing that. Like with all of us, if me and my brother, like even growing up, arguments, you're gonna go in the backyard, and we were like, just shut up, like nah. And I'm just happy that he did that, because he was trying to show me like, hey, boy, you can fight. You don't need to have fear. And he used to always tell me, and I use it to this day, fear is power. That's what he used to always say. He's like, that fear is power. And that got me through a lot of moments, man, when I was scared and just had to get through it. Use that fear as power, strength.
So I'm curious, how have you been able to use that with other, maybe fear facing, types of obstacles? And I ask you that because I know, like, I used to, have some kind of fear of public speaking, like getting on stage in front of a bunch of people. And once I got started and kind of I could get the energy or the feedback from the audience, I was fine. It was just that initial. And then one day, I had a business deal go bad one day, and I was on my way to a big event, and my former business partner was actually going to be the one that was going to be speaking. And I had just found out that there was some shady stuff done. He, no longer in business with me. And I was so angry about it. And then I had to be the person that had to get up on stage. And when I did, there was no fear. And what I tapped into is I figured that if I was angry about something, or I could get really focused on something else instead of thinking about what I was about to do, it took all that away. There was no anxiety there. So what, your dad, doing that and making you go back there, even though you had some liquid courage in you, you still had all that fear built up of your older brother.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to use that in your everyday life to get over anything that may be fearful?
To be honest, I mean, the saying in and of itself, fear is power, is exactly what it stems from. It was because that at that time, that was probably like the scariest thing. I mean, and I raced quads and I did all kinds of stuff, but that was so scary to me. But the feeling of facing that fear and the high that came from it, I will never forget in my life. That's why there's adrenaline junkies. That's why there's all these people. That's what I carry with me, is that the highest of highs tend to come from an association to risk. And risk usually leads to a certain amount of fear, because your fear, sometimes it might not even be getting hurt. It's just, I don't want to be embarrassed, or I don't want to be this. And when you overcome those fears, it's the best feeling in the world. So for me in my life, the way I've applied that is, it means that if I am in a moment of fear, it means that I have a chance to conquer something. It means that I have a chance to face those fears. I use that and translate it to failure. I have a huge fear of failure. Most people do, but they let that paralyze them. When what that fear of failure should do is it should drive you, because you're never going to let that fear happen. You're never going to let it come true. That failure that you fear, you cannot let into your life. And it's, as you said, as far as distracting yourself or getting there, the sense of going for it. At first, if I feel fear, then I know that I'm doing something that's worth it. I know I'm breaking my comfort zone, that I'm not complacent, that the reward on the other side is going to be great. And even for fighting, when I lost, the feeling of doing it is still worth it. It was still worth it, getting punched in the face. So that translates easier to me for mental things, even though sometimes the mental aspect is the hardest to overcome.
No, I think it is. I mean, obviously, I think almost in every scenario, it's just the mental obstacle of it. Because if you really ask yourself, if you just kind of go, all right, well, what is the worst case scenario if I do this? Typically, it's not going to be I'm going to get hit by a train or something, because those aren't the things that, those are real things that you should be fearful of. Like, should I take the chance of crossing the railroad tracks and the train's coming? But when you're talking about, should I get out of my comfort zone and maybe, quit this job to go to a better one that has better opportunities, but I'm so scared because I've been here for so long, or, what if? Yeah. And it's like, the what ifs you should not be paralyzed just by the one that, like, for me, like the speaking thing is like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, somebody could laugh at me in the audience. It's like, I'm still going to be breathing when it's over, right? I'm still going to go home to my wife and kids. It's not a big deal. But some people just cannot take that first step. And I truly think it just comes down to practicing it, right? Like, just once you kind of put one toe in the water and go, well, it wasn't so bad. And then it's about being consistent, because the more consistent you are, the easier it gets when you're trying to do it.
Yeah. The on my speech, something that like was funny, where I did as good as I did, I didn't get to bring my points around the way I wanted to, because I ended up being short on time. So I'll say that to anybody, be prepared when you go speak that you might actually speak slower. I thought I was going to speak faster, so I had more material written. I spoke slower. But anyway, the point about the train and the thinking and the practicing, right? Part of what I say is that most people, they're looking for motivation. And at first you need that, right? And that, motivation can be defined as the willingness and the desire to do something. So within that context, most of us are motivated. We are motivated. Like, you have the willingness and the desire, but how do you, quote unquote, take that step? And that's what breaks down to discipline. Like, what we're really all chasing is discipline. It means that when you know you should do something, but you can't find yourself able to do it, you need to be disciplined enough to do it anyway. And as you said, through practicing and doing things. And one of the examples that I use, going back to your train thing, right? Being scared to get hit by a train. I go, great point. Let's imagine you're standing on the railroad tracks and you see a train coming at you. And you go, well, I know I should get out of the way. Oh man, if this train hits me, sometimes that's all it takes for the train to hit you. Like, programming your instincts to get off the tracks and out of the way of the train. That's what we're after. Having that discipline, the interrupted mindset. If you go back to all these motivational like speakers, we all have a common denominator in essentially saying that, like, you have to become disciplined. You have to remove the thoughts of negativity from your brain. And in ancient, Chinese philosophy and proverbial wisdoms, they say the art of no mind. What that means is that you're not constantly putting failure in your mind. A good read for anybody out there, the 4 agreements, right? Is what you tell yourself. Like, somebody insults you or tells you you're going to fail, it doesn't mean anything if you don't repeat it to yourself. And that's the principle of this. So the way that I say to practice is with simple stuff like the motivation and the discipline. You walk by the trash and it needs taken out. And the first thing you're like, I don't feel like it. I'll do it later. There's your first opportunity of practice. Just take the damn trash out. And then the more and more you walk by it, you'll find it second nature and instinctual to just, you see a trash full, I'm going to take it out. Yeah. And those things are how you begin to frame your mindset into starting to think less. And like you said, our subconscious is always aware of the failures and the risk. We don't actually have to repeat them. They're there. You ain't got to learn that stuff. You ain't got to repeat it. You ain't got to beat it in your brain. You know damn well what the risk is. So you got to start pumping yourself up, tell yourself something positive, and just move, take action, because, thought just paralyzes you.
So what kind of things do you do? Is it daily for you as far as mindset techniques or strategies that you work on to help with the positive thoughts, whether it's gratitude or, what have been some of the things that you've done that have been super successful for you?
The biggest thing that started with me is it'll sound kind of foolish to somebody, but one, my mom's always been an optimist. So I've always had that perspective in my life of, you have a choice to I choose optimism over pessimism. But the way that I practiced it in my life was, so getting up to commute at 3 a.m. when I lived in Stockton, I'd get up at 3, I'd be on the road by 3:45, to be in the Bay Area by 6. Well, man, I started getting more and more tired in the morning, and I'd start thinking about work and, oh, this guy, oh, that guy and stuff. And I just get tired already on the way to work. So for me, it was something foolish. Like, how can I put myself in a good mood? So I know this sounds crazy, but I started just cranking the music, and I'd make videos in the morning to like Facebook, say, "What's up, everybody? It's Monday morning." And I had fun doing that, and it put me in a good perspective. And that was the first time, like in my adult life, that while still in adolescence, but that I started to realize, like, damn, it's an option, it's a choice. So the thing that I do daily is the moment that I start to say something negative, I just try to distract myself. That's every day. Like, what's going on? Like, you know what? It's raining, but hey, it's not snowing, or little things like that are how you begin to kind of restructure your mind and get it towards that positive mentality. And that's something I do every day. And then the other thing that's a constant reminder every day is the moment, and this happened to me my entire life, and I didn't realize it till later, but if I see any undesirable characteristic in another human being and the way they acted or the way they treated somebody, I don't like instantly just say, hell with them or anything like that. Like, we all have a reaction, but the biggest thing that I do is I judge myself. And before I judge them, I ask myself, have I exuded those characteristics? I've done that before. Like, oh my God, I've literally done what I was just so annoyed by. So just that's the first key too to programming in the back of your mind. Like, you know what? Next time, man, like, it's forgivable. I'm not going to hate them because I've done the same thing. And at the same time, you're putting a note in the back of your brain that the next time that situation comes up, you've seen it and you've seen how it played out. So you're going to have a slight bit of reluctancy in your brain to act in that undesirable way. And that starts to put you more towards a positive mindset. And you start appreciating good characters more, good people. And when you get yourself further into like, I'm going to make myself happy today, I'm going to find a positive today, I'm not going to judge everybody by the way they act, I am human, they are human, and I'm not going to let everyone bring me down. I want to elevate the room. I want to be light in a dark room. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go dark just because a room's dark. And it's a lot of little things that lead up to that, and it's reflection, and it's just choosing what to focus on.
Yeah, you made some really powerful points there. I mean, even some things that I was reflecting on, because I guess I kind of assume that as you were describing things, I was like, oh, I mean, that's exactly what I've done my whole life, and I'm going, well, everyone does that, right? But I mean, clearly everyone doesn't do that. But I was almost seeing, as you were talking about seeing someone do something in a way that you're like, you don't like that. And then you start reflecting and going, wait, I've done that before. But then you're also logging notes in there. Like, so my brain makes pictures for like everything. I'm very, very visual. And so it was like, I see these little Post-it notes all in my head because apparently I've done that my whole life, because there's things, now that I'm a father, that I raise my kids so much differently than I was raised.
Yeah.
And I think it was, and not, I feel like I had a great childhood. My dad was a Marine Corps drill sergeant, so I was raised a little differently. But I look at some of the things I do with my kids, and I'm like, well, that is, not the way that my dad was with us or something. And I think it was just things that I logged and said, like, this isn't bad, but I needed something different, right? So then that's what I'm passing to my kids. And I feel like in the world that we're living in today, you just see so much of people doing exactly what their parents did and their parents did. And it's like, nothing changed. Nothing's ever going to evolve if we continue down that same path of just doing what everybody else did. So I think it's super important for the listeners, that you, in order to make change, you need to read, you need to educate yourself, you need to, look at the people that are super successful. And I'm not saying success in the form of they're financially successful. I think success comes in many different shapes and sizes, but whatever success looks like to you, you need to go find people that have that and try to mimic some of those qualities and traits, and try to live more in the lifestyle of what they're living. How do they treat people? Like those are big things. So, and then but make those middle notes, like I saw something I liked in this person, I want to kind of promote that same approach to people that I'm going to come across, right? Go
That's
ahead.
what, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, because that's one of the when I talk about speakers having the same common denominator, and that's something that people are gonna find very common as well, is like shaping your environment. And the hardest thing, like, about everything we're discussing, right? Like, what's the first thing you did? Oh, pumping myself up and doing this. Everyone that listens and is in, they're all in different states. They're all in different rungs of the ladder, right? And that is one of the first steps. Like, if you find yourself in a toxic environment and you can't find positivity because you're always surrounded by someone naysaying, someone not successful, like, th- that's fine. That's fine, because you got higher to climb, and that's inspiring. That's inspiring when you're surrounded by that much negativity, because it's going to make it that much easier for you to be the light in the room. But what if you can't get your mind there? Then that's when that separation starts to exist, and people start talking about changing their environment. Get around positive people. Get around, if you want to be happy, get around people that are happy. Especially, all of our minds are shaped different. We're not all built the way I'm built or you're built. We're all individuals. So where I might have some strengths, other people have some weaknesses. Where they have, where they have strengths, I have weaknesses.
Yep.
But that's that part of changing the environment. And I say that to a part too. Like, I was thinking about it the other day, is it's like people talk about the baggage of this negativity around them, and oh man, everywhere I go it's like that. And I'm like, just imagine that all that stuff that you hate is in like a bag, like a Santa Claus sack or whatever, behind you, and you have this rope, and you're pulling that bag, and you're going and you're going and you're pulling that bag, and it's hard. You're like, it's always hard for me to move forward, all this negativity, and every time I stop, man, I turn around, it's right there. It's like, yeah, because you're dragging that fucking bag, dude. Let go of that rope. Let go of it. Hell with all that shit. Move on. Leave that shit behind you. And that's what everyone will hold on to it. And there's a point where those things can be fuel and fire to drive you, but you can't carry them and let them define you as a person, because you're just going to reflect. You're a mirror at that point, reflecting your surroundings.
Yep.
So that is one of the biggest starting points, is changing your environment.
Yeah. You know Tommy Mello with A1 Garage?
No, I'm not familiar.
So A1 Garage, a huge home service company, garage door company based out of Arizona. They're in like 19 states, but he's got a huge podcast, big following. I had him on earlier as a guest, and he talked extensively about the five people closest to you, and being able to really kind of see what your net value and stuff is worth based off the people you hang out with. And you have to surround yourself by, if you want success, you got to hang out with successful people, right? But if you want to be happy, you got to hang out with people that are happy, and they see life through eyes that they're not looking at the negativity in the world. I mean, I will tell you that most of the people I hang out with, they're educated and informed, but they don't watch the news every day. I mean, because
there's a good start.
It's like,
yeah,
I feel like I know every topic that's going on in the world, but I don't have to hear it from a news anchor, and I don't even have to read some of the journalism that's out there. I can get my news from different news sources, and just, again, be educated enough to know what's going on, but I don't need all the negativity in my life. And I've just kind of separated myself from it over the last couple of years, because I would get so caught up in the politics, and like the 2016 election. I mean, I thought it was going to be the end of my marriage. My wife was like, you spend more time fighting with people on Facebook that you don't know, you'll never see in your whole, never meet these people, but I'm having these full-blown fights with them, and it's like, for what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had to move my attention to the things that matter most to me, which was my family, my wife, my kids, my business. And I'm telling you, like, things have changed for me completely just by getting all that negativity out of my life.
It's a huge point right now, especially where we're at in society. Like, humanity wasn't necessarily like designed to be able to communicate to millions of people with the click of a button. Like,
right.
That's insane to even think or comprehend. And I tell everybody, I'm like, man, I want to I like liking my neighbor. I like liking all this. And I don't need to, if you shut off these outside influences of the news and everything, you find out that you're living in your immediate environment and surroundings. And that's what it takes you back to. I mean, you can go down all these separate roads, but ask yourself, how is this making my life better? It's not. And that separation is important, I think, for your mental health, man. And it was funny you said the 2016 election, because that was another huge turning point in my life. I'll never forget. My buddy Kenny, he overdosed. So I get a call that day, November 4th, right, 2016, and I get a call that day that he was a former Army Ranger, and everything going on really got to him, and I got a call that he had passed, and it tore me up, man. And I remember watching the election that night, and everybody going crazy and rioting. When we wake up the next morning, I found out my buddy's father just passed. He passed away from the same cancer that my father has now, and I'm like, my buddy Kenny left behind, a wife and his son. And here's, one of my best friend's fathers passed away with his wife and all of his kids and all this stuff. And I'm turning on the TV, and all these people are protesting and crying and freaking out over what? Like that level of hurt, that it wasn't even hurt for me. It was like what those families were experiencing more than myself. Is that, like, man, that's what really matters in life, is like getting the most out of those people that are by you. You don't know when they're gone. Like, people want to take everything and get sad. Like, think about the fact that you don't know when you're gone. If you're scared of something, then appreciate your time more. Yeah. We never get our time back in anything. And that's wild that you brought up that 2016 election, because I was in a hotel room in Seattle by myself. I was working out of town. So it wasn't like I was around my family or friends or anything. I'm just sitting in a hotel room, stirring that over. And I'm like, I turned off the news, man. And I just went to the gym. So it was wild though, and that's what, once again, it's environment and surroundings. Turn the TV off or something, and appreciate, who you got in front of you. So.
Yeah. I mean, perspective is it's big and it's important. And for me, now that I've separated, like, removed myself from as much negativity as I possibly can, like, I see I call them my circles. I shot a video on this recently. It's just because, again, I'm a visual person. So, like, inside of my head, I see, like, the rings of a tree, like when a tree's cut. And it's like, that's kind of how I have these rings of people in my life. And it's like, if you're not in one of those circles, and like the smallest circle there is like the humans that live inside my home. But if you're not in one of those circles, it's like, I mean, I don't want to sound, disingenuous or something and say, like, I don't care about you at all. But it's like, I have to put the attention to the people that I know are solid, most important. I want to know about their families. I want to know if there's any way that I can help them. If one of their, parents pass away, like, I want to be there to support them or something. But you've got to stop listening to all the noise and negativity out there. And then when you let yourself get personally invested into it, it's just a double loser. Like, there's nothing positive that can come out of that for your mental state. I mean, just so I think it's big that people listening need to start to make notes of who they want to be, right? Like, like, if you want change, like, you're not going to be able to make change by still listening to the noise every day and listening to the negativity. You just can't have it. Let's shift for a second. So you get out of Stockton, all right? You did some traveling. You're on your MMA producing fights at this point. Yeah. And your dad was unable to work, right? And then so your parents, was Idaho was just a hunting place, like, growing up? Well,
my parents were both born there and moved down to California in 83 and 86. And they had to move back. They lost, like, everything. So after 2009, they had to move back there in 2010 because it was the only house they could save.
Okay.
So once they went back there, my mom was taking care of the house and stuff, and my dad, the only work he could do was like consulting and traveling. So and he made good money consulting, so he's doing that for a few years, and then at the same time I started traveling. So it was pretty. The traveling part was pretty cool. I stood in the Windsor Tower, well, it used to be Sears Tower, but the sky deck. Me and my dad up there, we were on the same project in Chicago, so we got to stand up there and look down and stuff, and go to a Chicago Bears game, get ripped off on some scalp tickets, and then party in the parking lot with a Super Bowl truck. I'll always put a positive spin. Now that
That's
job
right.
site sucked, but it was fun, man. But then yeah, I get the. I'd known my dad was sick for a while, and there was a thing about like there just wasn't. My mom's like, where's a lot of this money going? Well, come to find out, my dad wasn't telling anybody he was doing experimental cancer treatments, like all these things, and that's where those chunks of money were going. And then next thing we know, he gives us a call and he tells us, and he's like, it's not good. I waited too long, and yeah, so from there he was still working for a little bit, but then it just got worse and worse and worse, and that's when I'm maxing out credit cards, like sending my mom all the money I can. My son was born, so I stopped traveling for work. I was working locally, and then every weekend I was doing side jobs, man, everything I could to send all that money. And I'm sitting there, and then I had one project where I'd been working like 20-hour days for like 3 weeks straight, and I missed a bunch of my son's improvements, and I was just pissed, man. And in hindsight, it's because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, and I was stuck in a trap of thinking that I had to stay where I was to make it in life. That I had to stay there. That I had a career most people would kill for. But it took me facing myself and a bit of self-reflection to say, I'm not happy with the circumstance. I need to be by my parents. I don't know how much time my dad has left. I need to do it. And that's when I set in motion the plan to sell everything I have and move to Idaho. And yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you went up there to be closer to your family. Had it always been a dream of yours to own a business and be your own boss?
Yeah, and that's what always, but it was one of those things in the back of my mind. I was saying, I need to be older. I need to do more. I got to do this. I got to save up so much money. I had all these roadblocks that I'd created myself.
Fear.
And yeah, fear.
Yeah.
And roadblocks to reinforce the fear. And that I said made sense. And the reality is that you're going to find out when, everybody listens to all these success stories, but they miss the part about that struggle in the beginning and the fact that they weren't guaranteed shit. The overnight breaks and success, those are rare. You can't live your life based on that. So the moment that, I made up my mind that I was going to make it work, that I did not see failure as an option, nothing like that. I mean, I had to buy a business. I had to figure out how to get money to buy the business. I didn't have that money. I found out about, people being able to carry the contract. How am I going to get a down payment? How am I going to do these things? And my entire life became switched towards, instead of focusing on the negative and focusing why I couldn't do all those things, I just looked for the yeses. I let the no's go by me and kept going until I could find the yeses to make my dreams come true. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say the point where you said there were so many things, the roadblocks that you put up in there yourself. Yeah. And the thing is that if people would reach out and read more on some of the successful people in the world in any type of business, most are an open book, and they are taught. They're not just there to, gloat about how amazing their life is and how successful they are. They talk about their failures and their setbacks, but it's all about the bounce back, right? And it's like, but until you hear one of those people that you now look and go, oh, well, he's a multimillionaire, or he's this, or she's that. When you hear where they came from and what their struggles were, like, I think it kind of, helps put you on the same playing field with some of these people. And I think that's a hard thing to do if you've never had anybody coach you along the way, right? I mean, I remember, being told by, direct family members when I was just going into business for myself, like, you need to go and, get this guy to be your business partner. You need to go and do this. Or my dad was like, you need to go to the shipyard, like where, he grew up and worked. It's like, no, like, that's not what I'm going to do. Like, I know I can do this if I put my mind to it. But I understand what you're saying, that there's a lot of people out there that will put these mental blocks in there themselves. Like you said, I'm not old enough, right? Like, I can't own a business until like, what is that magic number? But you don't know what you don't know. No. But they don't teach you this in college or anything else. Like, you need to graduate college and go start a business. Like, well, no, because that's not going to help. That's not going to help their business, right?
It's still your first time starting the damn business. You might have some tools in your pocket, but experience is huge. And I love what you said there about seeing the successful people too, because we keep bringing back that. And I say that's a good saying, is like, humanize your hero. You know what I mean? And a lot of people get lost too, of trying to be the hero. And it's like, most likely you don't want to be that person. What that person is like desirable and successful. So you yourself want to become desirable. Right. And when you start meeting those people and you like, as you said, you hear their stories, you hear their struggles, and all of a sudden that separation gets closer. Like, oh my God, he went through the same thing I did. Like, you're telling me you went through that too? Like, yeah. Oh, wow. Humanize your heroes. And some people don't have those people in their life. That's what's great about like the event that we met at, right? Like, look, we might not have ever met if it wasn't for an event like that. And that's what people should find in themselves. Like, if you are in a spot where you have no one in your life that's successful to look up to, you have no one in your ear whispering the wisdoms, no one saying, I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. Yes, I'm up here, but here's how you could avoid those. Okay. Evolution. Let's all get better. I don't want to. Most successful people in the world don't want to see people recreate the same mistakes they did. They don't find any pleasure in that. And that's why you feel and see them sharing their experiences, because once they attain that financial level of success, their aspirations and dreams go further. And typically that's by helping other people not make the same mistakes they did. And if you find yourself in a spot where you don't have people in there like that in your life, then look outwards, go to an event, go to a speaking event. Who cares if it's a big one, a small one, or something? Branch out, become adventurous, because as you stated earlier, if you don't break out of your box, if you don't break out of your shell, if you don't look at yourself and realize you want more and you don't aspire for more, then you're going to always be where you're at. And you're going to find yourself exuding those characteristics of those undesirable people that sit there and just complain every day and don't ever take one step towards their dreams. You have to move forward. Sometimes the first step, as we went to earlier, is that environment. And maybe you got to go to a speaking event. Maybe you got to go to something. Maybe you got to go to a freaking coffee shop where some good people are. Maybe you got to start talking to some strangers that look happy and say, hey, what's up? How are you doing? What do you do, man? You look happy. You have to break whatever characteristics are keeping you where you're at and surroundings. But
and I think what you said is so spot on. Like, you got to get out from your same old life. You've got to venture out. You've got to go meet people. You got to talk to people. You got to ask questions. I mean, if you're not trying to do some of those things, but you're telling yourself, I want to be different, or I want something better out of life, but you're not taking that first step to do it, I mean, you don't really want it, right? And I think a lot of people could truly just grow so much if they would just take that first step and like go to an event like you're talking about, because these people that, you said humanize your hero, it's like if they would really try to go meet these people, they would realize like they have a lot more in common than they really think. Like, they put these people on this pedestal, but like once you start talking to them, they've got a lot of the same stories that you and I do, right? I mean, they went to the same types of schools. They had the same kind of childhood. Like, they just think that because their life is so successful now that they were born that way and there was never any setbacks. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, like Jason Walker and I, like, our paths are so our past is so much alike, and then our paths to how we got to where we are is like neither one of us can really explain it. Like, we were both in law enforcement. We both kind of got a bad deal in law enforcement. We both were actively trying to continue our career path in law enforcement, and then something completely took us off course, and we're where we are in the HVAC, world, right? So you kind of got off course, right? Like your dad gets sick.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I do that a lot, man.
No, I didn't. No, I don't mean off course like that. I'm saying your whole career path took the same kind of change that you weren't expecting. I mean, you may have ended up continuing to be Dana White or something, right? Like, who knows what you were planning to do and where you are now.
That was like, in hindsight, my promotion really stopped when my wife got in her accident. When my wife got in her accident, she had to recover in Idaho with my mom, and that's when I took that traveling job. That's when I started traveling more, because I came home to an empty house, and I'm like, I took her to Idaho to propose to her. First day there, boom, now she's in the hospital. She wrecks a side-by-side, crushed her skull, all that stuff. So that's when I took to traveling. So my promotion company got put on hold, because I went for that. And the next thing I know, I was on salary, and then I'm traveling around, I'm working long hours. And that's when you mentioned earlier what made you kind of did you always know you wanted to be your own boss? And I would say that yes, in the back of my mind, yes. But when I realized that I needed to be was in the middle of this, because I'm sitting there and I'm traveling. I'm like, I'm always going to take full responsibility for all my actions, for all my projects. Like, I take it so wholeheartedly that I find myself angered because I'm blaming everybody. Oh, if you just did this, if you just did that. It's a vicious thing, man. And you can get trapped in there. And some people are okay with that. And I found out I wasn't. And what was making me angry is that I felt like I could do things better. So that's when I realized the only way to do that is to be my own boss, because I worked for an amazing owner and an amazing company, but I wasn't happy because it wasn't my journey. It wasn't my pursuit. And the way that I could do that was basically buying my own business. I could go take care of my parents, find a business to run, be close to my dad. My house is 0.9 miles away from my parents. I could be up here, start my own business, make it work. And it was a really big thing for me. It was hard, but I had to look at myself in the mirror and ask what I really wanted in the middle of what a lot of people would call a very successful career. But that's just what I would have done. And by now I'm at a point where I'm going to be promoting fights again next year. And now I'm better. When I was younger and adolescent, let me tell you, I didn't save shit for money. I was blowing that money buying suits, riding in limos. Like, I'm 23 to 26, promoting events that have thousands of people showing up. Like, by my 10th event, the CSAC Camo wanted me to hold one of the state tournaments for the amateurs. So I was doing that well. And then she got in a wreck, and it all kind of I just had to put it on the back burner. Did I really? I don't know, man. But it's probably a good thing I did, because at that time I wasn't keeping books too well, saving money, anything. So once again, the positive that I take from that is knowing that I was passionate there, and I was my own boss in the promotions, and I know the hustle that I was able to do while working full-time, overtime, all this stuff, side job, still promoting fights. And when I say that, it's not just promoting. I was the matchmaker. I was the promoter. I got all my sponsors. I did all my own graphic design. My business partner now partnered with me then, and he took care of like logistics for bleachers and chairs and cage and, but all the insurance and stuff, it was two of us, and so that was my first insight to being your own boss. And now I'm there again, and I'm reinvesting in that with smarter people around me right now. Instead of trying to be a real leader, recognizes talents and delegates responsibilities. And that's where I'm in the transitioning point to in my life now. Is I don't want to be the best business consultant. I don't want to be the best bookkeeper. I don't want to be the best tax man. I am going to find the best people, and I'm going to surround myself with them. And at first it might seem costly to hire these people to help you, but in the long game, it's very good. It's surrounding yourself with a team of professionals. That's why we all have strengths in different regards.
That's right. I think that's probably going to be one of the most important things of this whole podcast today that we could probably talk about. And so for the people out there that'll be listening to this, understand what Chad just said. I'm a huge believer in this. You have to surround yourself with the best people that you possibly can. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, always know that there are a lot of people out there that are better at whatever you think you're the best at. And it doesn't do you or your business any good to try to prove that you're the best at all of it.
Don't play to your weakness.
It's mind blowing how I see people that are so they micromanage everything and they feel like they can't let go of that control. And it's like, if you truly focus on your core values and making sure that the people that you bring into your company are the same people you would invite into your home to babysit your kids or eat dinner with your family, those are the people you want inside your company. And you're only going to be able to grow as a person, as a business owner, as a father, if you can step back, let people that are qualified and are the best suited to help you grow that business. Because I'll tell you now, like, if I didn't have the support team that I do, I mean, I would literally be working 200 hours a day. Like, I couldn't do it, right? But I'm able, because what I'm in business for is the freedom. I mean, I love being able to take my, if my kids are off for school for some random, teacher workshop day or something, like, I can get out of town and go with them, right? That is time that I'll never be able to replace. And that's something that, like, with my mom and dad, like, they both worked, 8 to 5, 9 to 5 hours. And like, we didn't get that. I mean, if we were out of school for something, we had a babysitter watching us. So I'll just tell people, delegate and elevate, like, get the people in place that are going to help you be able to succeed so you can go work on those other things. I mean, you're getting ready, and congratulations, by the way, on the events that you're getting ready to put back on. I'm sure that means a ton to you, that you've been out of it for a little while, and there's no doubt that you're going to have a ton of success with it, especially why? Because you learned from some of your past failures with it, right? Like, like, you won't be renting limos and, buying. I
probably still will, but no. I'll know where to put it now. But yeah, I mean, that's, I succeeded to a certain extent knowing nothing and being a fool to a certain regard. So yeah, I'm carrying some wind in my sails, and now I know that, and I can be even better if I delegate, as you said, and take my focus and apply it to my strength solely, to promote the events, to shake the hands, to go out with people and really promote the event, and let somebody handle insurance, let somebody handle matchmaking. And that's that delegating, to where I can elevate myself further by investing truly in what I'm great at. And sometimes, for people out there, you might think you're better at something. Listen to people when they're saying this is your talent. And I heard that a lot, and I kept hanging drywall and metal stud framing. When people were telling me, man, you're great in front of a crowd, you need to speak, you need to do this, I was scared. But
I think a point that you just made, and it won't be the same story for everyone that's listening, but when things come and happen to you in your life that you feel that you may be being pushed in a direction, and it may not be a direction you want to be pushed in, right? Like, you were comfortable, you had a union job, and like, you're making good money. Like, you're not just going to up one day and go, I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to go to Idaho and I'm going to buy a granite business, right? Like, that was never going to be something Chad was going to wake up and say. But you got pushed there, right? And instead of pushing back and going, how can I continue to make this work and do all these side jobs and I'll just keep sending my parents money, you said, no, I need to be closer. Like, I'll be able to do more if I'm closer. So when things happen like that, and for me, it was, I felt like I got screwed. I got brought into politics and law enforcement. I was, asked to make an arrest, or I wasn't asked. I was told to make an arrest, and it was a legal arrest, but it was to the sheriff's son. And then I got brought into politics there, and it was like, I'm like, my life isn't worth someone else to be able to, play games with, put food on the table for my family. So I thought it was so unfair. I was so pissed off, and I was like, fuck them. I'm going to go work in another department. And then I made a phone call one day and called a buddy of mine, and I said, you got anything you're working on? And he's like, yeah, I'm actually building mobile apps right now, and I was about to call you to get me to help you sell them. That was like eight or 9 years ago, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah. But when I say this to say, anyone listening, when something comes your way and it's throwing your life off track, don't always look at it as a negative. Like, take Chad's advice and try to find positive spin on things and go like, what if this is because of something bigger, right? Like
divine intervention.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right. So let's talk about, do you have a little extra time? Because we're going to go,
yeah,
we're going to go a little over.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk about the business. All right. So what did you know about Granite whenever you were going to buy this business? And you moved up there to be closer to the family. Were you going to go find a job with someone else at first, or were you looking for a business to buy?
So this is part of my sporadic nature that you guys are about to hear, and a little bit of self-confidence. But at that time, I thought I knew way more than I did, and I'm honest about that. At that time, I was like, hell yeah, like I can make it work. And I remember talking to my dad, and I'm like, hey, what it was, a friend of the family's. He's the one that owned this granite business. And for years, when I'd come up hunting, he's like, you need to get the fuck out of California. You need to call over, and you didn't just take over my bit. You did granite before. The granite that I did was when I was 17 and 18. And it was, my dad was hiring somebody to do our kitchen, and they wouldn't do certain cuts. So we watched these guys fabricate the granite in our driveway. My dad went and got the tooling. We finished the job, installed it. And then one of my dad's friends wanted granite. He had a connection on slabs. We got the slabs. We fabricated, installed his. So we ended up installing like probably 15 to 20 kitchens for friends and family. And then there was a set of track homes by the time I'm 19 that they were all getting granite. And my dad's buddy had the plug at the port for all the stone. They're like, we don't have fabricators. So my dad's like, hey, you and a couple of your buddies, get a couple of your buddies, and you got as many houses as you want a day. I'd have been filthy rich, but I was in the union. I'm working 40, 50-hour weeks. I'm, at that time bringing home like 800 a week, like clearing it, living with my parents with a $63 a month cell phone bill. So I was fine. I had a gas card and a paid off truck. So I didn't do it. So I lived with that forever. And that's why my parents' friends like, hey, come up, do the granite. Finally, he was telling me how much the business was worth. And I'm like, there's no way I can do this. And after that moment I talked about earlier, missing my son's improvements, like I'm going to figure out a way to buy a business and get up there. I sat down with the owner of the company at a Thanksgiving that we do up here. We do a Thanksgiving potluck. It's pretty cool. But anyway, and we worked it out. We worked out a deal, and I had to finagle so much stuff, man, to purchase that business. But I did. I came out. I ended up moving in May. I get up here, don't actually get to take over the freaking business till the middle of August. So I had 2.5 months that I had to survive off selling my house, off this, off that. I started doing framing and drywall jobs, made some good chunks of money. I take over in August. And during that period, when I first got going, it was like a totally different setup than the way that I learned granite. I didn't know as much about stones as I thought. I didn't know about as much about the industry as I thought. I didn't know how much the tooling and the technology and the digital side of things had taken over. So it was a giant learning curve, but the guy before me was successful and my craftsmanship was better. I'm talented with my hands. So in where he was, come to find out, the business was on its decline. And I didn't know that because he had his foot out the door for like 5 years. All of the luxurious lifestyle he was living, I thought came from that granite business. Nah, it was from other stuff. So I'm like, oh shoot. But if he was succeeding doing what he was doing, I knew that I would more than succeed doing what I was doing and doing what I was going to do. And that first year, I doubled the business. And then my partner, John Ruga, moved up. I made him a partner. We doubled the business again. We're almost 3.5 years in, and we've almost doubled the business again. And so
that's awesome, man. I mean,
it was a hell of a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm sure, like you said, you're good at working with your hands, so you knew how to do high quality work. You probably didn't know a whole lot about how you were going to get the phone to ring. You probably didn't know a lot about margins and, the cost of goods and things like that. No. So what has been the biggest, let's not say the biggest, what have been some of the things that have helped you in the success over the last couple of years, doubling the business? Because at some point it's not going to be, I mean, I'm sure some of it was just the way you guys operated, the way that you, the quality, the craftsmanship, like you were talking about. But at some point, it's got to be from the way you're marketing or advertising or your cost. I mean, so what are some of those things that have helped you?
Well, it was at first I'll say it was like ambition and just that part of the grinding that nobody sees. Like that's all it was. Is I was working around the clock, and I landed a contract that was framing, drywall, doors, hardware, acoustical T-bar, and countertops in 2 stores. So what's funny about my first year in the granite business, I really made my money from framing and drywall and my previous trade experience because I opened that door, I found a way, made it happen. That funded me. The next part of it was investing in the company in and of itself and not taking as high of a paycheck as I could have to turn that money back into the company and reinvest it. Now, the promotion company from the fights, when I talk about limos and all that stuff and suits, I spent the money. And the moment that the fight stopped, all the debt became real. And I have a fear in my life. No one's ever going to take shit from my family again. I'll build an empire and no one will ever touch my family again. So I knew that the smart play was to keep the money in the company and reinvest it into tooling, reinvest it into better practices. And when my partner John got up here, he's a nut and went crazy into the industry. He knew nothing about granite, never did granite in his life, but we had a faith in one another and we'd done tons of remodels together. We always had the same work ethic. Me and him are not very many people hang with us on our work ethic. So, and that second year, what actually made us double it was I was going after a commercial project. You know, the money's up, the money's down, and I put on my hat from superintending and all my experience in retail commercial construction. I went after this commercial project. I kept meeting with the general contractor, beating it, talking about critical path, a lot of things that I did to get that contract. And come to find out, to be honest, we talk about fear and risk. We end up getting hired by a subcontractor from Indiana that rips us off for $25,000. So then I have to pull off the project, let the GC know. The GC thought this guy was legit too. So we're fighting. Come to find out, he's a con artist. So he ripped the GC off for about 100 grand, got us for 25. GC hires us directly. Now, bad things turn to good, right? Because the project was so far behind from us pulling off by getting ripped off by this contractor, we were able to charge a much higher dollar rate because of an accelerated schedule and to fabricate and install these countertops. So we more than made our money back and got the rest of the contract for like 142 duplexes, that collegiate housing. And that we took that money, invested in the best practices. And then from there, the biggest takeaway that I had after that was solid and the business is flowing, I realized that I didn't respect our own value. That's something Jason talks about a lot, is that I'd been operating out of so much fear that I'd take those deals. I'd be the low guy. I'd do that. And that's when we were on this plateau. And no matter how much work we did, because we couldn't find employees. So it's us. We do everything. I still to this day, I actually install every countertop that I sell. We still install it every day. I'm about to go to an install after this podcast. But what I started finding out, and this was from listening to people and reinvesting myself and staying invested in knowledge, people like Jason, everything, is I started to respect my value. And I realized what we had as owners, you know who's in your home. You know who's knocking on the door. You know who's templating you. You know who's installing your countertops. My mother's my secretary now, one of the nicest people in the world. And why am I going to undersell that? I don't want to sell six, right? This is one of the things that I had to learn. And I tell people, do you want to sell 6 jobs and make $10,000? Or do you want to sell 3 jobs and make $10,000? That's a 50% closing rate, but I'm making the same money doing less work. There's a reason why those magic number in sales sometimes are around that 60 to 65% mark. Because if you're selling at 100%, you're selling too cheap. And anybody on the block can be the cheap guy. But protecting that value is what made us this last year nearly double our company. And that's something too with sales, man. If you're going low and you're so willing to do that, then with higher end customers, it becomes reluctant to work with you because why are you desperate? Why are you reeking of desperation? and, investing in our value, holding our prices high enough, and explaining why we are more valuable and more desirable has translating to our profit margins going up and working less. You
Yeah.
talked about your kids earlier and about being your own boss and having time with your family. This last month for me has been a reawakening like I can never explain, because my name is on the sign-in sheet for my son's little daycare a bunch for checking him in and checking him out, and that's more rewarding to me than any dollar amount. The fact that now that I decided to respect my value, I can take my son to school when I want, and I can pick him up when I want, when I never thought that was possible in my life before in construction, waking up at 3 a.m., being on the road by 4 a.m., getting home by, maybe by 5 p.m. It would have never happened, but now it is. And that translates to value. And I will give Jason Walker and Dave Pearson both a ton of credit on that. To people, his event is based on process. And it really opened my mind when Dave, just a buddy that I party with, he starts getting hooked up. Jason's his cousin. So he starts asking me, what's your process for selling stuff? Like, how do you respect your value? And he could ask me 10 times and I'd tell him 10 different things. So I had no process. I had no process, and I had different ways of finding my value work. And I thought I was clever and tricky and witty, but all that fails on one day that you don't feel good because you don't have a process. And when I started listening to them more, I'd bust their balls talking to them like, oh yeah, okay, but really, I'm like, damn, they're right. I don't have a process. I don't have a consistent way to respect my value and translate that to the customer and get the customer to trust me. I don't have a consistent route to victory in that regard. And that meant that I was undisciplined. So, and that's what came of value and process, and that's what came from the business jumping dramatically the moment we started following those guidelines. So
Yeah, I clearly, we talked about discipline earlier. Discipline, the consistency. I mean, it has to be both in your personal life and if you're a business owner, you got to take it into the business as well. It's let's get ready to start closing out here. All right,
yep.
and I want to talk about what advice would you give to one of someone listening, that is either considering leaving to go start a business. All right, you've been there, you've done that, or they're a business owner now and they're looking to just not necessarily grow the business only looking at a financial revenue perspective, but they're wanting to grow. They're wanting to be a better leader. They're wanting to be a better business owner. Obviously, we've talked about you need to get good people around you, the smartest people that are right, that can help support you to be able to take it to the next level. Like, you've got to be able to let people run your business so that you can do what you're best at. For me, it's networking, right? Like, I am good with building relationships. I'm good with, picking up a new partnership agreement, but I can't do that if I'm constantly worried about 9,000 other things that have to be done throughout the day. But at the same time, I don't lose any sleep at night because I have some of the best people on the planet, and they're not just good at what they do, but like, they're good people, that they're part of my family, So what advice would you give after the things you've learned, leaving the union, now running a successful business? What advice would you give them from a mindset perspective, to help them grow, and to maybe get over that fear of some of these obstacles that are in their way?
Yeah, I would say to the first part, the person that's looking at getting into business themselves, I would say first and foremost that the lows are worth the highs wholeheartedly. The lows are worth the highs, and you're going to face these fears. But as we discussed in the beginning, it's because you're scared. You're scared because there's potential for risk, and there is no reward if there is no risk. So it's absolutely worth it. And when you first get into business, you can read things about like manufacturing. There's all these old quotes that are talking about the race to the bottom, and that in order to last in business, you have to have a product that somebody wants. You have to have a quality, And for the most part, you have to be workable. You have to be able to work with people. If you don't have any of those things, you're going to fail. But a big thing is the value. And first and foremost, all of us, when we first get into business, we are so petrified that we don't protect our value. And then when you set your going rate, whatever industry you're in, and you set it low, the hardest thing in the world is working your way up. So keep in mind, protect the value. I mean, if you're starting your own business, know your market, know where the value's at, and refuse to be the low guy. And it might hurt a little bit at first, but it is going to get you to that next level so much faster than racing to the bottom and picking up all the scraps and going through that hurt and that headache. And if you don't have that much extra money, you can't hire and delegate to elevate. So the quicker that you can establish a workable, respectable value, the better off you're going to be. And for those business owners that are where they're at and they're facing a plateau and they're facing a time where they're kind of lost, it's reflect on yourself. Remember the aspirations and your dreams that got you to where you're at. So what is the next step? Is it an expansion? Is it pulling back? I see for the listeners out there, Jonathan's got that book Traction on the back, EOS. Are you going to start implementing a operating system? What is the next goal? And what happens typically to a lot of business owners that are plateaued or successful and they're kind of getting lost and empty, it's because they're not finding a way for more. Sometimes more might be finding a way to fill your box and letting somebody step into your shoes so that you can enjoy more family time. It might be you want to sell the company, so you need to fill a box. It might be you want to expand, so you need to focus on new employees. But most of the people in the world that reach a very high level of success and are at the top, they always want to do more. And, it's like guys that retire and work their ass off their whole life. And they're like, I'm going to do nothing when I retire. And then they get bored and complacent, or guys retire and do more than they were doing before. But for those business owners, I'd say just look at yourself and see what you want to do. Is it sharing knowledge? Are you looking for a new route or a new venture? You have to face yourself and reinvest in what you actually want. And if it's an exit, then okay. If it's an expansion, then okay. But go back to that mindset when you first started your business or when you first work your way up the ladder to take one over. Reinvest in that mindset. Don't be complacent. Don't settle, because it's never fun. It's never fun. And most people that have aspired and done that much, stopping only hurts them.
Yeah, those were some great value bombs that you just dropped there. I mean, for me, my world started changing, as soon as I started finding the right people. EOS has been game changer for my company. Getting the right bodies in the right places. I mean, look, there was a time that everybody, I communicated almost daily with every single person in the company. And today, you met Mindy earlier, the producer of the show. She's lucky enough that everybody reports to her, right? So it's fine. And you said finding someone that can fit into your shoes and be that expansion of you, right? And it's not the easiest thing in the world to find, but once you find that person or those people, like, doors will start to open and life will start to change, because you're able to check your son in and out of school a lot more often you probably could several years back. So that was some great advice there. You're host of 2 podcasts.
Yes,
before we go, I want you to talk about those for a minute.
Okay, so the first podcast that I host is more of a soul sharing kind of thing. Like what we were talking about is you meet all these people at different levels of success, but you don't hear that story of how you got there. So that's what created the podcast, The Journey. It's at The Journey RAC. RAC stands for Raising a Champion. So I am bringing on guests to talk about their hardest times, and not necessarily like, yeah, it's like, hey, you're here, but what was it like down there? What was it like through this? And to share those moments of those hardships and those hard times and things they had to overcome to humanize a hero. And I'm also doing that because it is like a video journal that I'm going to be able to look back on that lasts forever, that when my son grows up, he can look back and it's going to remind me where I was at when I'm this age, so that I don't ever forget that, like, I was that foolish once, or like, can you believe the shit that I was saying at that time? So it's like part of a journal entry. It holds me accountable for my own actions. It keeps me connected and networking with individuals that are aspiring and achieving, have achieved, etc. So that's the journey, and then on during the journey, every once a month or so, me and my wife go on there and do what's called the Queen's Take, and basically we go out in our shop, we get some drinks, and we talk about who we think's going to win the next UFC pay-per-view and who won the last ones, and that's like a date night for us. And that's like the biggest one. The one that people love the most are the episodes of the Queen's Take, and I love them. My wife loves them. It's awesome. And then the other one is Seeing Red with Austin Arnett. Austin Arnett's a UFC veteran up here. I train with him off and on. I'm not nearly as consistent, but Austin Arnett is in Michael Chiesa's corner up there in Spokane. They all train together. He's a member of Sick Jitsu. So Austin's perspective and view on the fight world and stuff, he has a ton of insight. He's always at the UFC events. So we get on there, and same thing. We discuss upcoming UFC pay-per-views and fight cards and fight nights. And there's a lot of banter and stuff in between as well. So it's a good show. And Austin's an entertaining character. So it's cool to get his perspective.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I wish you the best of luck on those. I think the most entertaining sounds like the one of you and your wife as well. So
yeah, everybody loves that, and it is fun. I mean, it's a blast.
I'm sure there's some banter there as well. So
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I think you were able to deliver some extremely valuable content that the listeners will be able to take. And my goal is just to hope that there was one or two nuggets that were able to change the path or story for someone listening, and that nugget will allow them to be able to check their kids out of school or bring them to school a little more often, right? Because those are the things that are impactful to you and I, that I can take off and go out of town or take my kids to Six Flags just because they're out of school, and you're able to have that same freedom. So, man, I appreciate it. I look forward to having you back on in the future, and I really want to thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And as you said, with the nuggets, that's why we do it. I tell everybody that all the hardships and pain I felt in my life, I make them all worth something by sharing the story and praying and hoping that I'm changing people's lives as well. So every time somebody listens and it helps them, it makes everything I went through worth it.
That's right. Thank you, Chad. I do appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, brother.